Hi, everyone. Welcome to Drawing 1, Art 204 for the summer 2024. This is Kim Grable, and I'm your instructor. And this session should be fairly short. We are talking this week about another fairly complex assignment to draw, and that's glass and translucent or transparent media. Um, I've got a couple things I want to show you, and then I'm going to briefly just talk to you quickly and briefly about the capstone. So, first things first, this is the beginning sketch of a transparent tape dispenser. So, this is what you would call an underdrawing. And when you're doing something really complex, like what you'll be doing with the glass, the transparent media, and last week also with the metal that you did. You need an under drawing or a beginning sketch or something that just gives you guidelines to get started and to keep your perspective, to know what goes where. A lot of this will be ultimately erased. But for now, right now, it's a great guide to helping me add in shadow and light. I can put in my light source wherever I want it. So the beginning sketch without necessarily a background or even a foreground is a great way to get started. So remember that as you set up these still life images of like this water. Um, Zoom out a little so you can see everything. Uh, okay, this is rather large, but you can see this is a wine goblet with water being poured into it, another with water, wine being added to the glass. And as the movement of the water enters and it really goes into a circular direction until it kind of comes in, circles, and then flows down. Um, but what you're looking at is really no more complex, if you think about it, than any of the other things you've drawn so far during uh, during this class. Now, this is very complex, as you can see, and this is not something that you would necessarily do. Uh, this is, um, I guess you'd call it a black paper or black matte finish, and then you instead of using all graphite, you do use some graphite, but instead of using all graphite like you do, and then add the extra highlights with your eraser, with this, you're going to be using highlights, are going to be adding highlights with your white pencil. Now, you're not going to do anything like this, but I wanted you to see it to show you how lovely and how complex drawing glass can be. Um, this is something that you would most likely do. Uh, a reflective uh, cup or glass of water uh, or some kind of beverage. Not only is the reflectiveness bounced around in the water, but also off the glass as well, as you can see. Let's go up here. This is another, essentially just water being poured into a different kind of glass, but it's all glass and it's all like a clear beverage. So the different media that I mention here uh, is the white pencil. Sometimes it really helps, especially when you're drawing something like water or something translucent or clear. You can see this is drawn on a gray, kind of a soft gray paper with a little bit of, it's not a bright white. It's got a little bit of not a texture, but a pattern to it. And something like this, let me show you the steps of how to essentially draw this. First, you rough it in, you rough the sketch, basically adding everything you think you need just as the first overview. Um, and then you start adding more detail and darkening the strokes. Also, notice that I've got this, or this person has a paper towel, or you have to have something, whether you're right or left-handed, to cover up what you've already done, plus to keep from smearing your work. This is a fairly quick uh, demo, really. It's really an image of a demo, but as the darker sections are being built up on this gray paper, then you have an opportunity to use the white graphite pencil, because if you only use the eraser, you're going to have gray highlights and nothing else. You won't be able to achieve the white highlights. So this is a particular time when you would definitely want to use the white color pencil. Most of the time you don't need to. You can rely on the background, and especially in your case, you're relying on the white Bristol board background. Be sure and do not work on the newsprint for these higher uh, reality and more detailed sketches that you're doing in the next week or two and the previous week. And then if you want to make sure everything is in perspective and looks really good, you can double check your perspective by adding or just by taking your pencil and making sure edge to edge it's equal here and equal here. So very, very simple, but also somewhat complex in that you're having to add your own highlights. Now, in this particular situation with this demo, you don't add your own highlights. Uh, you actually subtract graphite strokes and pull the white pencil, or excuse me, the white paper back in. You do not add white pencil. Couple things I want you to notice. First of all, she is not creating a perfect uh, oval there. And look how long her lead is on that pencil. I think that may be a Statler Mars, or it may be another brand, but she gives herself plenty of room with the graphite to add detail, to recreate that pointed uh, edge or end, and she can rub that against this. Let me just do this. This little area right here, she can elongate it even more by cutting away some of the wood. And of course, she can sharpen it too with an X-Acto blade or something like that. Okay, so that gives you a demonstration that you can go back and watch again and even kind of follow along if you like. But she is looking at a model. So that will, you'll need to definitely have a model when you're working with glass and translucence and transparency. Now, one of the best, I guess, e example of a translucent and very expressive part of you and a part of the body is, of course, the human eye. And so I've drawn several so that I could kind of take you through and show you what's what and how to quickly draw a human eye that looks very, very realistic. To understand how, you have to know what. This is the upper eyelid, and you can see it's got a little bit of like white dots. That's like a tiny hair also in here, very detailed. And in here, in this area, of course, you've got the lighter skin toward the edge of the bottom eyelid or the lower eyelid, and you've got some highlights here, highlights in the viscous area of the eye. You've got the pupil right in the center, and the color area is the iris. This is the eyeball, the tear duct, and of course, these are your lashes. So let me show you a couple of steps that I used to sort of go through this piece with you. Let me see if I can make it any bigger. Yeah. So you start off with a not so perfect circle inside another circle. And what this circle is really your boundary for that eye. That eye is going to fit inside a sphere, as you can see. And so this center is really the center of the eye, which is the iris. And of course, in here you'll see the pupil. But at this point, you're just sort of laying in or drawing the guidelines for what you ultimately will uh, recreate or what you'll actually be able to create. Uh, you start adding some definition. In the pupil, there is a dark area of the pupil and a big reflective area. And I just penciled that in just so I know where it is. Okay. And then I've got all these guides. And by the way, I'm using an HB or an H pencil. In this case, I used an HB. And then I come over here and I get rid of all this guide. I lighten this area so that it will not be a hard line, but I can eventually be able to blend it as perfectly as I need to. Okay? So at this point, you don't have a lot visible with the eye. You've got the basic underdrawing and very little else. So we're going to, I've got another step to go through, but before I take you through that, uh, I want to show you the different parts of the eye relative to size. The iris is about half the size of the entire eyeball. Now remember, the eyeball fits within your eye socket, and like your lower lid covers part of the eyeball. And of course, the upper lid does as well, the top of the eyeball. So just remember, this is just a simple layout of sizes and really nothing more. Uh, and when you're adding the pupil, this area right in here, uh, go ahead and just kind of sketch in like I did. Excuse me, the reflection. Okay, now step two is a little more detailed. I've got an an HB, a 6B, and an 8B that I'm using here, okay? And the pupil is almost always the darkest part of the eye, and it's very reflective. So you're going to have a reflection really at the top or wherever your light source is. If it's right in front of you, then of course it's going to be right here. It could also be to the right or to the left as well. That's really up to you and how you position your light source. And you can do this looking at yourself in the mirror. You can draw your own eye. So after you sort of decide where your light and dark is on the eye, on the pupil, on the iris and the pupil, then you want to sketch in that iris. That iris is made up of a lot of little fibers, little tiny fibers that create the color, and also has a lot to do with allowing light in and out, and also the pupils, of course, enlarge in the dark. But at this point, let's make sure that the iris at least is visible. If you're in a really dark place, that pupil can get really large. But consider this kind of a midday kind of lighting. So add more and more detail to your iris until it looks a little bit like the photo that I had earlier. It's going to be very, um, it will have a viscoid look, but it will also have little striations of color. Okay, now, of course, you're drawing in black and white, so you won't see color, but you will see the striations and, of course, the light and dark. Now, at this point, you're going to be shading layer by layer by layer. You're going to be building and building. And you're going to be using primarily with the eyeball itself, the pupil and the iris, and of course the reflection. You're going to be using pretty heavy pencils, 6B, 4B, even an 8B. Okay. I just want to make sure you have an understanding of that. Now, your third step is you're going to add quite a bit of detail in the actual white of the eyeball. You're going to add the tear duct, and of course, you're going to add the eyelids and the eye lashes. And you probably could even, depending on the size, you could even indicate the eyebrow if you want. But the iris is completely shaded the way you want it shaded. So you start shading the eyeball with an HB pencil. And this is the eyeball right here. And it's very lightly shaded. Remember, it's circular. So just like any sphere, you're going to have, it's going to be darker on the edges, but it will also have a lightening area toward the edge of the eyeball. If you were to open the eye really wide to see the edges of the eyeball, they are literally right beneath the edge of the eyelid. This is not a big, huge eyeball. It fits nice and neatly into uh, this eye that was built exactly for that eyeball. Also shade the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid. And notice that I used some cross hatching here and a little bit here, not as much. Be really, really, careful in this area because you can get to where it looks really, really, really dark. Um, now, I'm, I kind of think I went too far a little bit here. I think if I had stopped here, it would have looked a little better as detail. And I'm not talking about the eyelashes, I'm talking about just the overall darkness of the skin. Now, as you build, you're using an HB or an H and a 2 or 4B. So you're using light and well, I guess you would say light and not as light. You know what I'm saying? Or dark and not as dark. Now, once you get a good drawing like this, you're going to start with the paper stump. You're going to start shading and, really using anything to blend this area. You're also going to be cutting and using just a tip of your eraser to get these white areas really white. See that? That's the background coming through the page. It is not the white pencil that I talked about earlier. It will actually look kind of unnatural if you use a white pencil now, especially if you are working on a whiteboard. And then the final part is to draw the eyelashes. And the eyelashes start very tiny all the way to almost the tear duct. Same with the lower eyelashes. They're not nearly as dense. And some people have really long and others don't. This is really up to you. Now, I used a gel pen to get these highlights because my paper was not as hot white as your Canson Bristol board is. So keep that in mind as well. If you have color pencils and you've got a white, sharpen it really, really sharp, and then see if you like adding a little bit of the color pencil marks. If you like it, then continue to use it with the Canson. Just be sure that you don't make it look globby or unnatural. Now, I want to quickly go to the capstone that you're working on. This is primarily a landscape drawing. So what I would do if I were you, actually a couple of landscape drawings. So start looking at photographs of landscapes. You're going to do an urban and a rural, or a country and a city landscape. Plan your landscapes out where you don't spend hours and hours and hours. Remember, you don't have to have a lot of detail in the background, nor in, say, the parts of the foreground. If you have a certain part of a background that you want to emphasize, that's great. But the rest can just be lightly shaded and even indicated lightly with a pencil. I've got some examples that I will show you next week, the week before the landscape drawing, but I just wanted you to take a look, if you can, at the capstone information. Just give it a look. Remember, you've got to stay within perspective as best you can. So I would definitely look at photographs, look at your own environment, and I'd also remember simpler is the best because you can get it done quickly, cleanly, and in perspective, and you won't have to spend hours and hours of time. So that's all I have for today. Um, I will. I've looked at the work from last week, and some of it is unbelievably wonderful. So I will be working on grades today and tomorrow, and we'll get those to you just absolutely as soon as possible. So take care and have a great week.